They called it the fabulous Hudson Hornet. And for 3 years it made the fastest cars in America look like they were standing still. The strange part is what was actually doing the work. While Oldsmobile and Chrysler bragged about their new V8s, Hudson showed up with a Flathead 6, a design most engineers already thought was old-fashioned. Then it went out and won 78 races in 4 seasons. The question everyone kept asking was simple: how was a 6-cylinder beating V8s that made far more power? It was not a fluke, and it was not one lucky season. 12 wins the first year, 27 the next, 22 after that. Out of the 149 races it entered over 4 years, this one car won more than half and took 3 straight manufacturer titles. It made national champions out of the men who drove it, and it did all of that while the rest of the industry was pouring money into the future and getting beaten by the past. The Hudson had no secret rocket engine. What it had was 3 ideas that nobody else had put together in quite the same way. And the first one, you could not even see. A few years before any of this, Hudson was known for building sensible cars for sensible people. This was a company with a long, proud history, going right back to the earliest days of the automobile. It built its name on solid, dependable machines. Excitement had never really been the point. Then, in 1948, the engineers did something strange. Instead of bolting the body on top of the frame, the way every American car was built, they dropped the floor down inside the frame rails. They called it the step down. Passengers literally stepped down into the car, into a floor that sat lower than the door sills. It was also one of the first American cars built as a single welded unit, body and frame together instead of 2 heavy pieces bolted up. It sounds like a small thing. It was not. That single change gave the Hudson one of the lowest centers of gravity on the road, a body that sat several inches lower than anything Oldsmobile or Chrysler was selling, and a shell that was lighter and stiffer than the heavy sedans it would soon be racing. A comparable Chrysler weighed something like 450 pounds more. The roof sat a full foot lower. On a straight road, none of that mattered much. On a dirt corner, taken flat out, it was the difference between winning and spinning. While the big V8s fought to stay pointed the right way, the Hudson just went around the outside, quietly. Like it was cheating, except it wasn't. The story even goes that General Motors bought a few Hudsons just to study how they cornered. Make of that what you will. The second idea lived under the hood. While everyone else chased the new overhead valve V8, Hudson doubled down on an old design and simply made it enormous. The Hornet's engine was a Flathead straight 6. Side valves, cast iron, the layout most engineers already considered yesterday's technology. But this one displaced 308 cubic inches, which made it at the time the largest 6-cylinder engine in any American passenger car. It was actually bigger than the 303 cubic inch Rocket V8 that Oldsmobile was so proud of. The block was a chrome alloy casting, ribbed for strength, riding on 4 sturdy main bearings. The bore was just under 4 inches, but the stroke was a long 4.5. And a long stroke like that does one thing very well. It makes torque, low down, right where a heavy car clawing out of a corner actually needs it. In stock form, it made 145 horsepower. That does not sound like much today. But paired with that low light body, it was plenty. And there was one more quiet advantage: a simple, understressed engine, built almost to racing tolerances at the factory, tended not to break. Over a long, brutal race in the summer heat, the fancy new V8s would wilt or let go entirely. The old Hudson just kept running. The overhead valve V8 was clearly the future, and Hudson knew it. It simply bet that for a few more years it could keep winning with what it already had. But a good chassis and a strong engine do not win anything sitting in a showroom. Somebody has to take them racing, and somebody has to believe in them first. In the spring of 1951, that somebody walked straight into Hudson's headquarters, uninvited. His name was Marshall Teague. He ran a service station down in Daytona Beach, and he had just won a race on the sand there in a Hornet. He had tuned himself. Most privateers would have gone home happy. Teague drove to Detroit, walked into the offices of a company he did not even work for, and made his case. He wanted Hudson to back him. Remarkably, they said yes. The deal that came out of it was quietly historic. Hudson gave him cars, an engineer, $1,000 a month, and the right to keep whatever prize money he won. It is widely regarded as the first time a Detroit factory openly backed a stock car team. Teague painted 3 words on the doors of his car: the fabulous Hudson Hornet. And then he went out and made the name look modest. That decision, to back a racer instead of just building cars, seemed small at the time. It would end up defining the company. What followed was one of the most lopsided runs the sport has ever seen. In 1951, Herb Thomas took the Hornet to the national championship and became the first driver to win a NASCAR title as his own team owner. The next year, Tim Flock did it again, in a Hudson, occasionally with a small monkey named Jocko Flocko riding along in the car. Yes, really. Then Thomas came back and won a second title in 1953 in his black number 92 Hornet. In 1954, he won a dozen more races and still lost the championship, edged out by the steadier Lee Petty. Even Hudson's off year would have been another brand's best season. Thomas and Flock were the headliners, but the Hudson bench ran deep. Dick Rathman, Frank Mundy, Al Keller, all of them winning in the step-down cars. By then, the pattern was almost absurd. If you wanted to win in NASCAR, you drove a Hudson. Privateers and factory hopefuls alike lined up for the low sedans because nearly everything else was fighting for second. And this is the part people still struggle with. On paper, the V8s should have walked away. It helps to look at what the Hornet was actually beating. Oldsmobile's Rocket V8 had lit the fuse on the whole horsepower era, and it was quick. It started life rated at around 135 horsepower, a strong number for the day. On paper, it had the Hudson covered, but on a hot, rough 200-mile race, paper melted. Cadillac had a modern V8 of its own. And in 1951, Chrysler rolled out the Hemi, an engine that would become a legend in its own right. Every one of them had more power than the Hornet, but power does not drive the car. In those early years, the new engines were mild, tuned soft for smooth family sedans, and the Hudson simply used everything it had better. It outhandled them into the corner, outlasted them over a long, hot race, and put its torque down where it counted. Week after week, on the beach at Daytona, on the red clay of the Carolinas, on the high banks of the dirt miles, the same squat sedan kept turning up in victory lane. The most powerful car does not always win. The one that wastes the least does. Up to this point, Hudson looked untouchable, but the very thing that made the Hornet a winner, an old engine pushed to its absolute limit, was also the thing that would quietly run the company out of road. Because to keep winning, Hudson had found a loophole, and that loophole is where the story turns. NASCAR in those days meant strictly stock. The car you raced on Sunday was supposed to be the same car a customer could buy on Monday, so Hudson played it perfectly straight and completely ruthless. It started selling the fast parts over the counter. There was the twin-H power option, twin carburetors feeding that big 6, worth a useful jump in power. It showed up first as a dealer-fitted kit, then as a full factory option, and the racers grabbed it the moment it appeared. There were heavy-duty pieces sold as severe usage equipment, meant on paper for police cars and export roads and high mountain passes. And then there was the 7X. A hand-built racing engine with a higher compression head, bigger valves, a hotter camshaft, and a split exhaust, assembled and sold through Hudson dealers. Because you could technically walk into a dealership and order these parts, they were, by the letter of the rules, stock. Hudson never officially said how much power the 7X made. The story goes it was around 210 horsepower. Some builders swear it was far more. Nobody wrote it down. Marshall Teague and a Hudson engineer named Vince Piggins had helped build this parts catalog into a weapon. It was, in every way that matters, one of the earliest versions of a trick the whole industry would later live by. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. So, Hudson had built the winning machine and a perfectly legal way to keep making it faster. What Marshall Teague did with that combination bordered on the absurd. After falling out with NASCAR's founder Bill France, he moved his Hudson over to a rival series called AAA, and there it got almost comical. In 1952, he won 12 of the 13 races he entered. He clocked 112 miles an hour on the sand. And when officials pulled one of his winning cars apart bolt by bolt, convinced no stock car could be that fast, they found nothing illegal. It was, they had to admit, 100% stock. He was named national champion twice. By the middle of 1953, the formula was complete. The chassis, the engine, the parts, the drivers. Hudson had, in effect, built the perfect stock car for the era it was racing in. The trophies kept coming, and the record book kept getting rewritten. Thomas even won the Southern 500 more than once, grinding down the field over 500 miles on the long paved straights of Darlington, where the durable six had all day to prove its point. He would end his career with 48 wins from 228 starts. That is a winning rate of better than one race in 5, a mark that still sits at the very top of the sport. He won at least one race in 7 straight seasons. And in an era when a good payday might be a few $1,000s, he became the first man to clear $30,000 in prize money in a single year. For a stock car driver in the mid-1950s, that was a fortune. But standing there in victory lane, surrounded by trophies, nobody noticed the trap. The same success that made Hudson unbeatable was quietly steering the whole company toward the edge of a cliff. The trouble came from 2 directions at once. Out on the track, the V8s finally grew up. The soft, mild engines of 1951 were gone. In their place came far stronger machines. The Chrysler 300 with its Hemi, followed in 1955 by a small, light, cheap V8 from Chevrolet that would change everything. The old Flathead 6 had been pushed about as far as iron could be pushed. There was no more room to grow. And a long stroke, a big and torquey as it was never going to out-rev the future. Off the track, it was worse. Hudson had quietly bet the company on a small economy car called the Jet. It was meant to be the safe bet, a sensible compact for careful buyers. Instead, it swallowed a development budget the little company could not spare, and almost nobody bought it. The money drained away. In 1 year alone, the company posted its largest loss ever. A firm that small could not fight a horsepower war and a sales collapse at the same time. So in the spring of 1954, Hudson did the only thing left to do. It merged with Nash, and the two of them became American Motors. The factory support for racing dried up almost overnight. The step-down Hornet, the real one, ended that same year. Hudson treated the merger as a fresh start. It should not have. The cars that carried the Hornet name after that were really Nash's wearing Hudson badges. The magic was gone. Out on the circuits, the little Chevrolet on the short tracks and the Chrysler Hemi on the big ones took over the winning. The Hornet managed one last major victory early in 1955, and then the great run was simply over. By 1957, the Hudson name disappeared from showrooms for good. From the first championship to the last car took barely 6 years. And yet, for a few short seasons, a stubborn 6-cylinder from a fading independent had done something none of the giants managed. It had beaten them all, at their own game, on their own tracks, with technology they had already dismissed. It is widely remembered as the first true factory dynasty stock car racing ever had. The men who drove it, Marshall Teague and Herb Thomas, became legends of a sport that was still figuring out what it was. And the Hornet got one more life that nobody saw coming. Decades later, a generation of children met a wise old blue race car in a Pixar film, a character named Doc Hudson, voiced by Paul Newman, with 3 championships in his past and a racing career cut short. He was modeled almost exactly on the fabulous Hudson Hornet. In the film, Doc keeps 3 Dusty Championship trophies won in 1951, 52, and 53, the exact years the real Hornets ruled. Paul Newman, a serious racer in his own right, even drove one of the actual cars. Most of the kids watching had no idea they were looking at real history. The only known factory Hudson to survive from those championship years is now preserved as a piece of national history, and when one of these Hornets crosses an auction block, it can change hands for more than $1 million. Not bad for the slow 6 that everybody counted out. As for that little Chevrolet V8 that finally knocked the Hornet off its throne, the one nobody took seriously either, that engine went on to become the most successful V8 in history, and that is a story all its own.